Hey, all right. So recently on Twitter, there was kind of this thread going around where it was, or hashtag, I guess is a better way to put it. There was a hashtag going around where it was top 10 games of the decade, since there's only about 3 months essentially. Well, at the time, it was literally
Yeah.
3 months left in the decade. Um, so you can pretty much tell there's only maybe one or two games coming out between now and the end of the year that you would consider for this kind of a thing. So,
Yeah, very limited.
yeah, so for that reason, people are going through and making their lists ahead of time before it ended, and so we thought we'd make a video about games that came out in 2010.
Yep. From the last decade, basically. This is going to be kind of we review those games. Um, Not all of them will be games that we even got to own. Some might just be notable and quick mention.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about actually what you just mentioned, games owning or not owning games, in the sense that there's a couple things that I came across about myself that I hadn't thought about
Mm.
from making my list, which is that I was like a very games as a service person for the first half of this decade, where I was probably playing like the same game for the majority of the year at that time,
Mm-hmm.
for most of the time, and so the number of games, different games that I tried from like 2015 to 2019 is much larger than the number of games that I tried from 2010 until 2015. So there was that issue. Also, the other thing I wanted to mention was that I never owned a PlayStation 3, and I don't own a PlayStation 4, because at the time when the PlayStation 4 came out, it just wasn't economical for me to have both.
Yeah.
Um, and now that I could afford both, it's kind of like been in a holding pattern of, well, PlayStation 5 is in 2 years. Well, PlayStation 5 is in 1 year. And so
Yeah.
I keep putting it off, even though there are definitely games for PlayStation 5 that I really want to play. And those will be on like the recap list, but unfortunately, they're not going to make my top 10 list for that matter.
Right. I'm in the same boat. I own a PlayStation 4. That's the only difference there. I don't own a PlayStation 3. It's one of the only systems besides a handheld system like 3DS. It's one of the only systems I haven't owned. I usually try to get every system. I will say, I think it was good to get the PS4 because I got exclusives that I didn't want to miss. Where PS3, there was a lot less. There was stuff missed, but a lot less. If I hadn't gotten a PS4, I would have missed quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, I definitely. There are definitely PlayStation 4 games that I'm looking forward to buying and playing on PlayStation 5, assuming it's backwards compatible. Which I think the word right now is that it will be.
Yeah, if they at this point they've got to. I think
Yeah,
they learn from mistakes or lack of doing that in the past.
yeah, so I'm definitely planning and looking forward to playing some of those, but for the purpose of this list, I just want to admit ahead of time, I haven't.
Yeah.
And as much as I wish that was true, that's where we're at.
Yep. Also, when it comes to this list, I think we both have some of our own individual opinions or rules for what we wanted to include or maybe exclude. So, for example, for me, I had some when it comes to sequels.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about sequels, which is to say, um, especially for not so much for the notable list, but especially for the top 10 list, I really didn't feel like putting multiple versions of the same franchise on there. And so I'll go into it at the time when we get to the top 10 list, but for specifics on this where it comes up. But what I'm trying to get at is I will either put my favorite from the franchise in the decade, or if there's a specific reason why it's different than that, and I'll bring it up at the time, then. But in other words, even if like there are two games from the same franchise that really are probably two of the best games, in most cases I tried to include only one.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. There's definitely a case where I would have put two games in the decade on my top 10 list, but it's the same franchise. I didn't want to include both because I felt like that was taking away from something else. I also had a kind of side rule where I almost didn't want to I only wanted to use the first game of the franchise or IP. There's just my exception to that rule was if that sequel took that game to a whole nother level where it changed the gameplay or changed everything to such a dramatic effect or almost reboot within the current numbering system, then I felt like that went on. But it usually would, in that case, go on at the cost of the first game not being on. The other side rule was, for me, if the original came in the previous decade, that was some extra thought for me as far as should I include the sequel in this decade, because it's not, kind of breaking that rule.
Yeah. Because otherwise you couldn't put like Mario on the list.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's 30 years old.
And we'll be able to kind of flesh that out as we get to those games being mentioned.
Yeah.
Because then I can explain my reasoning a little bit better.
Okay, so let's get into notable games. We're going to go year by year to start with before doing top 10 lists. Just like notable games that came out each year. And so obviously we'll start with 2010. Just stop me if there's any that you want to comment on.
Yeah. I'll chime in if I need to.
For 2010, notable games that came out. Bayonetta came out in 2010. Super Mario Galaxy 2 came out, which I have played, and it's a really good game. I mean, it's kind of like the Majora's Mask of Mario games, where it's essentially Mario Galaxy 1, just more and better. Well, people won't necessarily say... Mixed opinions on Majora's Mask, obviously, but
that would entice me. My only comment on those games, both one and this one, is I didn't play either, and I do regret that, even though I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah. I think Galaxy is probably, for me, above Sunshine, but below... Well, it's kind of what we talked about earlier with sequels.
Yeah.
It's better than Mario 64, but Mario 64 has a special place.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's better than Odyssey or not. Anyway, we'll move on. After that, we have Red Dead Redemption.
Red Dead Redemption is a huge game for me. I love Rockstar games, almost all of them, especially after GTA 3 kind of changed the game, almost everything they've made. But yeah, that was 2010 for me was a year where I had a lot more time. Kind of touching on what you talked about. One thing I didn't say at that point is, you said I think 2015 to 2019 you tried a lot more, where for me it was dependent on what came out in the year and its relation to kind of MMOs or RPGs playing at the time, or the service games.
Yeah.
Mine almost was different in a way where there'd be years or two where I played a lot of games, and then I was locked into something that was like a never ending. You can't beat this game.
Yeah.
So this year I think was a year that I was able to play a lot, but I also spent quite a bit of time with Red Dead Redemption. I think it's a great game.
Actually, speaking of that, I wanted to move into... Skip one on the list, we'll come back to it, and mention StarCraft 2, because that falls into what you're talking about just now. StarCraft 2 is a game I played a lot of, because I played a lot of the PvP mode on there, well, which is what most people do.
Yeah.
It's not really something... You can buy it for the campaign, but it's a very short game. So, StarCraft 2 came out this year. It's a game that I played probably for like 2 or 3 years after that, quite a bit.
Yeah, and actually, the point I should make, it's not just MMOs. PvP games are a big part of that. I just want to lump those all together. Those cause the same... I guess I would call it a problem, but the same thing where you've spent a lot of time on it without testing other games in the meantime.
Yeah, so from here forward, a lot of the games we're going to go through, my reason for not having played them is going to be StarCraft 2, but we'll go back to the rest of the list. We have Alan Wake on the list.
Yep, played that, enjoyed it, played it, beat it in one sitting kind of a thing, but it was a good game.
Halo Reach is on the list, which I think a lot of people consider to be the last good Halo. It's the last Bungie Halo.
Yeah. For me, it's the worst Bungie Halo, but it's also because I guess it's the worst multiplayer Bungie Halo. That's what I will say.
I don't want to get derailed, because I feel like I could talk about Bungie Halo for a whole recording in itself. But I agree. It's not my favorite Bungie Halo, but it's the last Bungie Halo, and for that reason, it's like, damn. That was 2010.
Yeah. And my only other thing I could say we could skip on, it's the last Halo I've played.
Yeah, that's true for me as well. Next we have did that one. Next we have Darksiders 1.
Yep. I have played and beat that. I really liked the game. It made me really embraced because they've gone on to release sequels there, and we can talk about those later. But I played that in the same year it came out, so not later. And really great game, really great combat. Made me look forward to a sequel, and that's where I'll leave it.
Okay. After that, we have Mass Effect 2, which I don't think either of us played.
Nope.
But considering the reception to Mass Effect 3, I'm guessing it's probably the best Mass Effect game. So it made the list as a notable, but it's not something that either of us feel really special about.
It's not the genre I prefer, but the game type I prefer.
The next one was something that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, Dead Rising 2 was next on the list, and that, to me, Dead Rising is, if this list that we're going to talk about at the end here was a list of our favorite franchises, Dead Rising would be on my list. And to me, this is the best Dead Rising game of all 4 now. 5 if you count the offshoot game they did.
Oh, the Zero Hour?
Well, they did Dead Rising 2 off the record.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where it just replaced the protagonist with Frank West. But this is hands down the best one. Everything that was struggling in the first game, I can't say enough about how good the franchise came out, but there's still issues because it was the first game, so that, like, rescuing survivors was very clunky, even though I hate that word. That's actually describes that. They improved that so much it wasn't really a non-issue in this game. Loading times were improved, and you get the absolute blast of the Dead Rising game, which for me I like the zombie portion and using anything as a weapon. One other thing of note is this is the game that introduced combo weapons, which I believe is in every game from here on out. I don't know if I love that. I loved it at the time, but I don't know if I love what it turned into. But very, very cool game. Very great story. This also was the last game with the true time limit for your campaign and missions. Something that I think is an important part of the formula of the game that once that went away or started to go away, the game suffered. I also have a lot to say about the next game on our list, which is Castlevania Lords of Shadow. This, to me, is one of my favorite IPs as well, so it's funny that they're in a row. Castlevania Lords of Shadow is the first Castlevania game after... I can't think of the name of the developer that took it over.
Well, I think more notably, it's the first Castlevania in a long time at that point that wasn't mimicking the Symphony of the Night formula.
Yeah, that's true. And it's a true reboot. What I would say, and this may make some people like it more or like it not want to try it more, is it is a very... It's like it's on its way to becoming a Souls game or a From Software game. Because the combat, it's hard, and the combat is kind of similar. It's a little bit more forgiving, I would say. So it shouldn't turn you off if you think it's going to be a hard game like that. But that's what I really liked about it, is the combo style and the depth of combat. And it has a great story. For its time, the graphics were great. Like I said, it's a reboot, so you can get into the series from this game. One last thing I'll say about this, just for me as a person, Castlevania is one of my favorite genres of all time, but I actually didn't get into it in Nintendo. I don't think I played the Nintendo Castlevania right away. It's just my first long-term Castlevania was actually for the Game Boy.
Yeah, the DS ones. Those are really good.
I always liked the music in them, and I knew of the music, but that game I played from start to finish, basically. And
yeah, it could. Unfortunately, this could devolve, so I don't want to go into it. But yeah, the DS, when Castlevania moved to Game Boy as its primary delivery device, that timeline was really strong for the game.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people didn't follow it out because both Lords of Shadow and the follow-up, which we'll talk about later, weren't nearly as critically acclaimed because it was kind of like, why move away from the Symphony of the Night formula when you don't have to? Or, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think the results were good.
Yeah, I think it was mixed reviews, but I think it's aged well. The last thing I will say is it doesn't follow the Metroidvania theme, but that did kind of change, and we'll talk about that later.
Okay. On the list next, we have Fable 3. Not much to say here. It's
only Fable I played.
Yeah.
And I liked it, but...
Solid game. Yeah. NBA Jam on Fire Edition came out, which was just an Xbox Live arcade game, but you wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention it because it's actually, when it comes to arcade games, especially at this time, that was not something I put a lot of time into. I actually played the heck out of this, and I think NBA Jam on Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis era was the last time I played an NBA Jam really heavily, and it brought back a lot of the nice nostalgia there.
Okay. After that, we have Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, which was the multiplayer Assassin's Creed, I believe.
Yep, it's the second, I think, of the Ezio trilogy. And the reason I wanted that to be brought up is it's the first that introduced multiplayer. Multiplayer was unique and very fun.
Bioshock 2.
I think this is on the list really just almost as a, not to focus on any negative too much, it's the only Bioshock I didn't play, and I love that series. It just didn't interest me to play as the Big Daddy the entire game.
Okay. Transformers War for Cybertron.
I'm not a huge Transformers fan, but I, for some reason, got this game, and this game was the most played PvP background. It had a campaign, but really this game was, we talked about Halo Reach earlier. I did not like the PvP in that. This I did. This actually kind of upended the Halo PvP for me for that year.
And then lastly, for 2010, we have Final Fantasy 13, which I want to talk about. This was the first Final Fantasy that I ever bought that I wasn't able to just sit through and beat in my first, like I moved back to other games before coming back to it and playing it. Now, part of that is the game's fault. I don't think it's the best Final Fantasy, but part of it also is that I melted my Xbox 3 by playing at like 90 degrees, 9-degree temperatures.
What system was it?
It was on 360.
Oh, 360. Okay.
And I didn't have an air conditioner. I used to think I was a genius in saving a ton of money by not having air conditioner, but in the end, I ended up melting PC and an Xbox 360 by playing in like 90-degree weather before I finally broke down and bought a window unit. But yeah, I thought I was saving all this money, but in reality, I probably ended up spending a lot of money. So
replacing systems.
Yeah, so I ended up not being able to play Final Fantasy 13 till much later because I melted it. But anyway, that is neither here nor there. So that's all of 2010. Do you have if you wanted to pick like a game of the year for 2010, would you pick one of?
Yeah, it's hard for me because I just went on and on about Castlevania, but I think I had to give it to Red Dead Redemption. If you want, you can say Game of the Year and honorable mention. Game of the Year would be Red Dead Redemption. Honorable mention would be Castlevania: Lord of Shadow.
I think for me, it's Super Mario Galaxy 2. Granted, a lot of that's because I didn't play a lot of the other games that came out this year because StarCraft, I believe, came out in March. I don't remember for certain, but it was earlier in the year, and so yeah, not a lot of other stuff got a lot of chance from me, unfortunately, including Final Fantasy 13. Although I don't think Final Fantasy 13 is a better game than Mario Galaxy 2, so I will stick with Mario Galaxy 2.
Choice. Okay.
2011 brought us Portal 2. So I wanted this one on the list. This is a game that I played. At this time, I actually bought the pack and played Portal and Portal 2 at the same time. And I had not yet played Portal. So maybe part of like my memory of how good Portal 2 is because I played both at the same time. Because there are definitely a lot of people who think that Portal 1 is the better game. But I think Portal 2 is really good because I just think it would be a challenge. If you played Portal 1, for them to flash that out into as long of a game as Portal 2 that had as cohesive of a story as Portal 2 had is kind of surprising. Like, if you play Portal 1, you might think there's only so much you can do with this. Mm-hmm. As cool as it is. But yeah, Portal 2 is really solid, and I really liked it a lot.
I've seen gameplay of it. It's a puzzle game, which usually I would like. It's one of those random ones. Maybe this was a year that I had too much going on. It kind of looks like it by the list. But
after that was L.A. Noire, which was, I believe, a PlayStation exclusive when it first came out, or was that not true?
I don't think that's true. I think it was PS3 and Xbox 360, but I don't remember having to wait to get it.
Oh, okay. I remembered playing this with my brother because he has a PlayStation 3. So maybe that's why I thought that.
It would have been a good group game to play as.
Yeah, we played it
sounds familiar.
Co-op pretty much the whole way through.
Because of the investigation aspect. It's a solid game. It's a Rockstar game, and you heard what I said before about them, but It's still third on the list when you take all their franchises as far as GTA, Red Dead Redemption now, and LA Noire.
Do you think it's good enough that it's surprising they never did a sequel?
That I do think, yeah. Um, did they do a State of Emergency too? That would be my reason why I think that, because that game's not very good. But
I don't
if that's
remember
even the right name. But
no, that is a game.
yeah, no, I owned it. I think that's the only game I've ever sold back to a game store. Just wasn't my thing. Anyways, not something we're talking about. So LA Noire, really good game. I think the concept is phenomenal. I think it didn't flesh out as great as it could have, as far as I thought you were really going to be doing more of the investigation point, and it became a little lead, where you were very
I'm going to
linear,
say something controversial yet brave.
Okay.
I think I would be more excited about a sequel to LA Noire than I would be of GTA right now, today.
Man,
Only for
that
this
is
reason.
controversial.
Only for this reason. Because for me, Red Dead and GTA are like different skins on the same game. And we
Yeah.
more recently had a Red Dead. And we haven't had LA Noire in a really long time.
See, my reasoning for not wanting to do that is I think the LA Noire should replace Red Dead, because Red Dead doesn't really have anywhere to go unless they keep doing prequels, and even that's gonna
Sure,
get
I
silly.
don't mean it in that deep of a sense.
I just mean GTA is the one untouchable, like infinite. You can
Oh, and
keep
I
making.
obviously they're not going to get rid of it.
Yeah,
And I'm looking
that's
forward to the next one. But I feel like I just played a new GTA, and so I really feel like playing a new LA Noire would be more exciting.
One part of it is, for me, is I think the new GTA is rumored to be something like Vice City style, and
I'm ready for
that's
that.
yeah. The only other thing I'll say about LA Noire is it did give us the doubt meme, which that's
Yes.
got to be points there.
Tons of points for that one.
But yeah, great game. Really, it's the investigation thing was going to be cool. I liked the interrogation, and then that ended up turning out to be, it doesn't seem like that mattered too much, but I agree a sequel could fix that.
Yeah, there's a lot
Expand
more.
upon it.
Technology is much better than it was back then. Okay.
Gears of War 3 is next on the list, and that I don't want to spend too much time, so we can move along. Best Gears of War, maybe total for me, but definitely for multiplayer.
I played the multiplayer on this game. I did not play the campaign.
Yeah, I actually don't know if I can remember much of the campaign outside of some of the spoilerish
But
things.
yeah, definitely. Multiplayer Gears used to be hype. And maybe it still is. I just haven't tried it recently.
Yeah.
I haven't played Gears of 5.
I haven't either.
Okay. After that, we have Dark Souls. I don't believe either of us have played this game. It's obviously notable.
Yeah.
At the time, most people didn't know it was going to be good or even existed. I don't think it sold very well.
Was it Demon Souls first and then this? I'm trying to think of when it was an established
Yeah,
genre.
Demon Souls was first.
Because I don't know if at this point yet, it would be established as these just are hard games.
The only thing I had heard about it was there was a famous blogger who famous within the realm of Final Fantasy XI players.
Yeah.
Who was also in my guild, who had strongly recommended Demon Souls to me. His name was Rusta. But I never took him up on that, so I never did try it, unfortunately. We'll mention our first Souls games later. They're both on the list.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But obviously notable. This is the year that the first Dark Souls came out.
Yeah.
NBA 2K12 was next on the list. Normally, sports games would not come up, but you would want to talk about
I just
this.
think it's notable to mention that. No, I can't remember all three of them, but there was three people. I want to say I definitely know Michael Jordan. This is the first time he's appeared in a basketball game, basically. Larry, I think Larry Bird was the other one, but I think Magic Johnson he was the third for sure. So that's it. Just wanted to mention that it was pretty huge, and
Okay.
Yeah.
Another largely notable game, Skyrim came out that year.
really good game. I might have scored it less in my own personal views as far as lists because it's been released about 27 times, and
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm kind of a hater when it comes to Skyrim. I think Skyrim's a good game, but for me, having been a very old, for me, it's been a hard transition as Japanese role playing games have become more and more like Western role playing games. And so I'm kind of like bitter towards Western role playing games in a way. And so for me, Skyrim, I do think it's a really good game, but typically I just don't really get into Western role playing games, and it's probably a problem with my attitude more than them being good or bad.
I will say, I think what I need to do, because I don't want to skip this game up in the list, but it's coming up in the list. I have more to say about it, but I will wait till we get to the game that I'm going to mention.
Batman Arkham City is the next on the list.
This game is, without spoil, I have to be careful how I say this because it's one of my favorite games of all time, I guess, which obviously is a little spoilery there if you think about it. But Batman Arkham Asylum was obviously the first one, so this is the second one in the series. But this is perfection upon an already really good formula. I'll even, because we're going to talk about this probably more later, what I'll say right now is the one negative I actually have associated with these games is they didn't introduce it. Maybe they did. We got detective mode from this series, and that's the only negative. It works very well in this game, so I'm not taking... I
think detective mode overall is good, but the implementation is often bad or required.
Here's my problem with detective mode. In a game, and this was one of them, even though I'm not holding it against this game, in a game where you have to find hidden items, it's often better to have detective mode on to find those items, and then you're playing a beautiful looking game, but 90% of the time you're in a X-ray vision mode or something, and you're not getting to appreciate how good the game looks.
Speaking of good-looking games, we have some really good-looking games coming. Actually, these next 3 games I think are all really well-made in the graphical department games. Uncharted 3. I don't really want to talk about this one too long. Both you and I aren't like the biggest Naughty Dog fans. They definitely put a lot of high-quality work together, and their games are well-made. But
the stories are good.
Stories are good. They look good.
But I could just watch a movie. I mean, I gotta be careful when I say that because I don't want to play a video game that's that linear and that necessarily easy where it's just like watching a movie. That's the difference.
Yeah.
I like movies too, but these games are movie quality stories usually. But the gameplay doesn't enhance that for me.
For me, it's the gameplay actively detracts from it.
Yeah.
The shooting in Uncharted, I just do not enjoy at all.
Yep, exactly.
Next one, similar comments. Skyward Sword. Probably the best looking Zelda game of all time when it came out.
Yep.
In some ways, it looks as good as Breath of the Wild, honestly. It's just It's
just the non-cell shaded.
Yeah.
Especially if that was a Wii game. So if that had actual HD, I think you could do Component, which made it look very good.
Yeah, I had Component on mine.
I don't know if I ever had that.
Really good looking Zelda game. I like the idea of like a sky city.
The layout, everything. It's the game I wanted to play the most. Definitely of the decade. Maybe more. Maybe of my lifetime. A game that I wanted to play the most because I liked everything about it, except for the controls were that bad.
Yeah, for me, the issue was, the same thing, but to be more specific, the first boss that you ever fight in the first dungeon has like this parry mechanic where you have to swing sideways when he parries horizontal or vertical attacks, and you have to swing vertically when he parries horizontal attacks. And the problem is the Wiimote can't tell what you're doing.
We should mention that they created a new Wiimote for this game, which should have been the answer.
They had to get the HD movement attachment. If you had just as an aside, because someone will put it in the comments. The golf game from EA that year also required you to buy it.
Okay.
So that was when it first happened.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if I knew of any other game that.
That's why I had it, because I bought Tiger Woods Golf because I thought it would be really fun, because I liked the Wii Sports Golf, and so I thought this would be really cool, and it was cool. But
did Skyward Sword always come with that Wiimote? That's how I got one, because I have a gold one.
I think there was a version that came with it, because I bought the version that didn't, because I bought the version of Tiger Woods that came with it. But anyway, yeah, so if you would try to like quickly move, if you're holding a hand in a position to do like a horizontal slash, and you try to move to do a vertical one quickly, it would interpret that.
The problem is if you didn't have your hand always in the center of the axis. So that's what you usually would do. So if you tried to swing from right to left, you would move your hand to the right first,
And it would think that was a swing.
That would be the problem.
Yep.
That was the issue with the game. If you take in Twilight Princess when they first added Wii things, but it wasn't full. It was a decent amount of gameplay that was.
Well, it's just
swinging,
like aiming and stuff like that, which was
basic.
good.
I didn't love having to do it as often as you maybe necessarily had to. The bow and arrow, for example, was perfect.
Yeah, the bow and arrow was...
Shield bash and all that stuff I didn't love, but it was fine. It didn't detract from the game itself or the story. This game it 100% did, and that specific boss... I quit a few times because I thought, I have to play this game. It's really good. I really like the look of it. I really like the progression, and I couldn't do it.
Okay, next on the list is Marvel versus Capcom 3. Notable, Marvel vs. Capcom 3 came out earlier the same exact year, but obviously this being just a more improved version, we decided to include this one.
And we both owned this one, too.
Probably the best looking Capcom fighting game of all time. There'll probably be some people out there who prefer the pixel look of some of the older ones, and I don't disagree with them. Like, I love the way MVC2 looks, but...
It's very successful. I mean, if you count the merging of the two releases, the longevity of the game in the competitive scene.
Yeah, this is a really fantastic game in my opinion. I want to mention something here real quickly for any fighting games that got brought up. Both of us enjoy playing fighting games, but mostly just like against each other and stuff. Neither of us are like tournament level players, so like if you're gonna be someone who's gonna say, well, like MVCI plays better, I'm just not good enough to notice that. I'm sorry. For me, the graphics are, and the fact that they included X-Men, especially, it's just more important. So, as a non-tournament player...
X-Men being in the game, I have more to touch on because of this is the year that my fighting game repertoire, I don't even know if it changed, but we haven't gotten to that game yet.
Yeah, we can move to there next, actually. We can just skip to it and come back later. Yeah, we should
skip to that, because I think this...
Mortal Kombat 9 also came out this year.
And I don't know how much after, because it actually was in April. I think Ultimate MVC hadn't come out yet.
Yeah, actually, regular and Marvel and Mortal Kombat came out around the same time, and then Ultimate was in the fall.
And Mortal Kombat 9, really technically just called Mortal Kombat. It's just numerically it's the 9th game in their series, and it was a reboot, but that's the easiest way to identify it. That changed me. Kind of what Slush was saying earlier is we both just kind of played fighting games against each other, especially up to this point.
Yes.
Before this game came out, I was not competitive. It was, except for with my friends.
Yeah.
And
it was not weird for us to play, like, we've literally played best to 100s in Soul Calibur 2. Yep. But playing against other people or in tournaments was not a thing.
Yeah, didn't seek it out, didn't really know the scene. Because of this game, and I'm probably going to spend the most on this, even though I loved Arkham City, because of this game this year, everything changed for me. They had great marketing, first of all. And leading up to the release of the game, they had streams, they had hype. And that got me into watching Twitch more than Twitch was pretty new at this time for the casual person. That got me into watching Twitch, I think, more than anything else. And as that happened, by the time the game came out, I decided, man, I've never really been good at a fighting game before. I want to try, and I had the time at that point when the game was coming out to try and put in whatever work I needed to see how good I could get. And that's what Mortal Kombat 9 is a special game for me for that reason, because I was terrible at first. And then I read things, I watched streams. Really watching tournaments was huge for me. And the sheer amount that I watched did more for me almost than reading about things, because it was just seeing the stuff on repetition as far as what people would do and movements and listening to some really great commentators. And I was terrible. But I just, one of the pat on the backs I might give myself is I actually just kept going. Usually I quit, and I failed and had a terrible record. And then this game turned out to be, I got really good at it. I actually got matched up with some weird flex here coming, but I got matched up against some actual pros on Xbox Live, and I won a few of them, and some of them handily, and it just was huge. It was a huge turning point for me with fighting games, and I never made it to tournaments ever, but this made me want to actually compete. And in this game, I think I would have done well and could have.
Okay.
And then also notable about it, side thing, is this is the first time they did a true story campaign, which changed the game.
Yeah, this changed the game for what is acceptable for single player content in a fighting game.
Yep.
And that will come up later, but
basically you're going to hear other fighting games on the list, semi-spoilery, for other years, and the only reason is they have to be credited back to this game and what changed and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. Now we got to move back because we kind of skipped a couple here.
I think you could skip this one, really, because that's the only game of its... Well...
We noted here that DC Universe came out that year. Not much to say.
Just DC MMO. Very... a lot of Warcraft clones, I would say, came out
and this was a fun
decade,
one.
And this was a fun one. But yeah, that's...
Dragon Age 2 also came out that year.
This is the one that I wanted to touch back on Skyrim for. Really,
okay.
That's the main thing. Is because Skyrim... Well, Dragon Age in general, I mistakenly thought, and this is not a spoiler because it didn't come out in this decade, Dragon Age Origins is the first of the trilogy. I mistakenly was going to put that on my list, so I can say that now because it's not on it. Because I thought it was in this year. It was 2009. That game was phenomenal for me. When we're talking about Mass Effect, Dragon Age is the lore that I like more. Not that I hate space,
medieval
but
type
medieval
stuff
like that.
Yeah.
Yep. Especially when you think about Lord of the Rings popularity near the middle of the 2000s to 2010. Really early part, I guess. Dragon Age 2 was a good game. I beat it, but it changed. It just changed for the negative from the first one. The reason I wanted to compare it to Skyrim is Skyrim had better quests, and the open world felt better. This felt very strange, especially when you think about how good the first Dragon Age was.
Yeah.
What this has the edge on, what you're talking about for RPGs, is it still had the party system, which that's really where Skyrim suffers. There's no party-based combat.
Yeah.
If Skyrim had a 4-person even or 3-person party, that you had to have that many characters that you worked on, I think that game would have got much higher review for me.
That's kind of a Western RPG thing though, to be by yourself.
Yeah, well, and that's what so maybe I should be saying.
So it's kind of it depends on what you're into, I think.
Yeah. Dragon Age you couldn't do that solo stuff, and that's what I really liked about it.
The next one on the list is Dead Island.
Dead Island was another RPG, more like the solo thing, so the Western thing, but in the zombie apocalypse world. Just a really pretty game, and at the time, pretty unique because RPGs were starting to come around a lot more often. Now it would seem very redundant, and there's a lot of games like that, but at the time it was pretty unique.
And then lastly, we have Star Wars Old Republic. I think that's kind of similar to DC Universe in the sense that really not a lot to say here. It's just a good game. It's a fun game.
World of Warcraft version in the Star Wars universe, which is a good idea.
So, 2011 Game of the Year. Do you have a choice?
Yeah, I don't always want to have honorable mentions, even though this is going to be 2 in a row. So, Arkham City actually is my number 1. Mortal Kombat 9 is my honorable mention, and the only reason that doesn't get number 1 is because I didn't feel like it should get number 1 just because it changed my personal fighting game community deal, but that's it. How about you?
I think for me, I would have to say it was LA Noire, but that might be a personal issue in the sense that I played through this entire game with my brother, and so it was a lot of fun for that reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this didn't seem like a year where you had as many games. I feel like a lot of the games on the list I wanted to make sure and touch.
Yeah, I think outside of Portal and LA Noire and the fighting games, yeah, I don't think I played any of these games. Mm-hmm. Oh, Skyward Sword, obviously.
Did you really play that? That's right. Yeah. Past the first boss. No, I did a little bit, but yeah.
Okay.
All right.
So 2012, the first one we have on the list here is Xenoblade Chronicles, which was very hard to get. So I have actually never played this game. But I wanted to include it because a lot of people really like it. Controversially, this game, it was a GameStop exclusive because they didn't think it would sell very well. Mm-hmm. And so GameStop actually ended up, I guess the word on the street is that because there were so few copies and it turned out to be really good and people wanted it, they upped the price to like $80. And so, yeah, there's a lot about that game, but I just wanted to mention that it came out because it's supposed to be really good. It's being re-released next year, so I hope to play it then, but we'll move on. Diablo 3 came out this year. Diablo 3 was a very bad game
You
in
owned
2013.
it when it came out, right?
Or 2012,
You owned
sorry.
it at the release date, right?
Yeah,
Because
I
of the
actually was
Warcraft
one of the
tie-in?
people who tried to log in for like 3 hours when it first came out, and then ended up going to bed and not playing it for the first time until the next day. But irregardless of that being a bad experience, the game was just straight bad
Yeah.
in 2012.
I have stuff to say about it, but there's a game in the next year that I think has to tie into that too much, so I'll say, yeah.
Just the only thing I would say here is playing it years later after changes had been made and after the expansions came out, it was a significantly better game, and even I would describe a very good game.
Right.
But in 2012, that game sucked. Anyway, after that, I put down Torchlight 2 just because this was not an indie game, but a very small studio game that came out the same year as Diablo. It was a clone of Diablo, but with different art style, and it was a better game. But now, in 2019, Diablo 3 is a better game. But mentioning just at that time, a lot of people...
Big difference in budget and...
Yeah, a lot of people that wanted to play Diablo 3 really badly and were disappointed by it moved on to Torchlight 2 for that reason. Yeah. So then Darksiders 2 came out this year.
Yep. I wanted to mention that because two reasons. One, I said how much I liked the first one, and and this was Death, and if you know about me, I like the Four Horsemen concept, and Death would be the coolest usually in that category, and I didn't get it. I don't know if you could rent games still at this point, but I didn't get any hands on it until this past, maybe in 2018 when it was on Xbox Game Pass, and not much to say besides it's either been too long since that game came out, and even an HD remake didn't do it for me, but I wasn't grabbed in the same way.
Okay. Walking Dead Episode 1 we put on here as notable. I mean, the game essentially spawned a studio.
Yeah.
They ended up making tons and tons of games up until they disbanded this year for bad money management, but we'll don't need to go into that. It's worth just mentioning this is when Walking Dead...
Not either of our, I guess, really game styles.
But this is when Telltale started. Worth bringing up. Resident Evil Revelations started in 2012.
Yeah, we could talk about the next two games because they're very... I can't believe they came out the same year, but Resident Evil Revelations was a game that, after the Resident Evil series kind of went down to more of an action, almost like shooter game, from its survival horror roots, people always would go back and say you should play Resident Evil Revelations because you still like it.
Well, and speaking about that, Resident Evil 6 also came out this year.
And that... So I didn't play Resident Evil Revelations because you needed a 3DS, which I never owned. So I couldn't tell you how it was at the time. Resident Evil 6 did come out. I actually liked it because they tried to go back.
Well, there was one character where if you played them, it was very old school Resident Evil-esque.
I think it's a bad game if you want Resident Evil 1 gameplay. I think it's actually a good game if you have no prior thoughts about Resident Evil and just want a game to play. There's three technically a fourth campaign, but 3 campaigns that are all pretty different, and one of them is more like classic Resident Evil for most of it. The other 2 are actually.
Max Payne 3 also came out this year. I did not play this game.
No,
which is weird because it's 1 and 2 are some of my favorite games.
Yep.
But I have not played it.
Yeah, it's weird that it's Rockstar to me. That's all I'll really say. Not bad or good that it's weird. It's just weird. I always forget that it's Rockstar. But
next on the list, I have Hotline Miami, which I put on the list. It's not a favorite of mine, but for me, Hotline Miami was when I became aware that indie studios were really starting to make games that were like as interesting or good. And I mean, this has probably been true forever if you're a big time indie person that goes way back, sure. But for me, this is the game that made me aware. It's like, wait, this is something I should be paying attention to. Hitman Absolution is next on the list. Both of us are big fans of the Hitman series. This is by far my least favorite.
I think for me, I didn't touch Hitman until Blood Money, which was Xbox 360, 2006 range. I've done everything you can do in that game. and it's one of my favorite games, definitely of that decade. And
We did a lot of that game co-op actually
yeah,
too.
and it was a great game for that. Actually, Hitman games technically in general are. I would even argue that Absolution probably could have been too. I just didn't live in the same state at that point. Hitman Absolution I was really hyped for, and maybe that's part of the problem.
I think that's a big part of the problem for me.
I will say I think we had different views a little bit near the end because I was able to go back to it, and that sometimes can make or break a game. I played through it, and I didn't enjoy it, and then I went on to maybe some other games I was playing at the time, and then I went back and tried to play it more of the Hitman Blood Money style where you'd replay levels, and it was better, but it definitely, I agree, it's the worst game since, which is hard because Blood Money is one of the best, but Blood Money on, it's the worst one that's come out.
Assassin's Creed 3, which is the Revolutionary War one.
Yeah, I think we can be short on this one. I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned this is the one that they added the boat, like the ships combat.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't really talk much about this game without talking about story. Because basically all the good things I like about this game are about the story, and all the bad things about this game are about the story.
Yeah.
The gameplay is just standard Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
So not much else to say about that.
Yeah, really, it's the beginning story and
yeah,
forcing you to be
there,
almost like a tutorial for too long. And
yeah,
then,
tutorial gameplay was very long,
but then the last half is very good. When you get the taste, if you haven't played an Assassin's Creed where they have the boat combat in it, you're missing out because when you get immediately when you get on the boat and start learning the controls and the mini tutorial there near the end of the game, it's like, wow, I can't believe this exists. This is so fun. They should make a game about this.
Well,
yeah,
and we'll get to that later. Halo 4 came out this year. We talked about this earlier that neither of us have played the 343 Halos, but it's Halo, so it's notable. Super Mario Wii U came out this year. This is notable, well, because it's Mario, but also because there are definitely people who say that this is the best 2D Mario. I'm not one of them, but it's a very strong entry into 2D Mario.
For me, I can't compare 2D Marios past Mario World. It's the 2D Marios from Mario World and before, and then the 2D Marios from Super Mario U, or whatever the regular Wii version was called.
Mm-hmm.
Not U.
Well, the regular
Mario's
one
Wii,
was probably my
Mario
least favorite, so
Oh.
this one definitely beats that.
Okay. Well, then, yeah, so in my list, this would be the best post 16-bit era.
It's hard because, like, obviously I like all of the old ones better, but that's so subjective for, specific reasons.
Yeah.
Like me being 12 when I played them for the
Yeah.
first time. But
I
unfortunately for that same reason, Mario World can never not be my favorite. Mario 3 can never not be my favorite.
The only thing I will say is I think this one brought the Koopa Kids back, and the previous Wii only one did not. Is that not right? That's huge for me, but if that's true, I just don't know.
I don't recall.
I know this has Koopa Kids in it.
Yeah.
They're different.
Well, there was a time period where Baby Browser, unfortunately, kind of
This
replaced
has
Koopa
both,
Kids.
but I believe the Wii one only uses Baby Bowser.
Okay, yeah, and the Koopa Kids are just more interesting in every way than Baby Bowser, but that's neither here nor there, so we'll move on. So that's 2012. Do you have a Game of the Year?
This is going to be weird. It's actually Resident Evil 6. It gets a lot of hate, but for me, of what we just discussed,
I'm looking at this list, and I don't think I can give one.
yeah,
It's just any game that I would say would not be as good as the 2011 or 2010 game, and probably the 2013 game.
Yeah, and so my side point to having Resident Evil 6 is, we don't want to spoil our top 10 list, and we were talking about maybe mentioning as a fun thing if we had a game in this year on the list. I will say for sure I did not have a game in 2012 on my top 10 list. It was a drought for me.
I think Xenoblade Chronicles probably would be on mine it would be my Game of the Year if I had played it. Everything I've heard about it, it's right up my alley, but that's just unfair. Hopefully next year, it's coming out again next year with redone in current console visuals.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it, but I just can't put a Game of the Year on any of these. I guess Diablo 3 if you count how it is today.
Yeah, I would have. I don't count it there. I count it that year.
Yeah, it was terrible. So
for those kind of games, expansions count as the sequel rule for me. So
sure,
Diablo 3 base game. No, I had a hard time labeling one for sure. Resident Evil 6, I do legitimately think was a good game though. It's just not
Okay.
breathtaking.
So 2013, first thing I have on the list here is Ni no Kuni. I have not played this game, as we mentioned at the beginning. Neither of us owned a PlayStation 3, this was a PlayStation 3 exclusive when it first came out. It is actually available on all systems now in 2019. But it came out at a really bad time. It came out in September of this year, which, if you know anything about games that are coming out right now, a lot of games came out. So I was just more interested in playing new games. But I just wanted to mention it. Game very well reviewed, looks pretty, probably a good game. Next we have...
So Castlevania Lords of Shadow, Mirror of Fate is next. The only thing I will say here, it's a great game, but this was the 3DS version. When it came out, it was only available for 3DS, so I didn't own it. I couldn't own it because I didn't own one. It was released to Xbox 360 arcade a number of years later, maybe only a couple, but that's when I got to play it. It's the reboot that we talked about with Lords of Shadow, but this one is in between Lords of Shadow 1 and Lords of Shadow 2 as a kind of bridge the gap of the story, but it's in the format of really more like your Symphony of the Night Metroidvania. Really good. Really very good, but think of handheld graphics. It's not...
Yeah.
That's not going to be the best graphics in the world.
Okay. Then the next one is actually a game that both of us very much like. It's the first Square Enix Tomb Raider game.
Yeah, it's weird because when I think of the things I don't like about Uncharted, this fixes a lot of them. So, for example, there's some things in this that are in Uncharted, like the force,
arena
debris
combat
is falling. Well, like you're having to escape something. It's done much better in here. I don't even know. Maybe Uncharted did that after this. I don't remember.
I had not considered that comparison before, but I agree. This is just a better Uncharted.
Yeah, the combat is great.
The graphics are not... I'm not going to... Obviously, these are good graphics. They're not as good as Uncharted graphics. And the story's, it's kind of plain compared to an Uncharted story.
It's an origin story.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is not...
But if you compare the gameplay, yeah, a lot of the same beats are there, and this is just strictly better.
And you could call them choreographed, but the things I was specifically talking about, like having to get through a plane crash while it's falling off of a cliff, kind of a thing.
Oh, like QuickTime events, you mean?
Well, but it wasn't QuickTime events. It was you were in control of the character. It was kind of like what you don't want QuickTime events usually.
Yeah.
And I would definitely take this over those.
Yeah, I agree. This is a really good game. I don't really have a lot to say about it because I played it 7 years ago or whatever, but I enjoyed it a lot. I think that Crystal Dynamics has done good things with the series, even though they're not my favorite developer in the world. But yeah, very good first showing from them.
Mm-hmm.
Next up was BioShock Infinite.
Really good game. BioShock is a great series, even though I haven't played the second one. BioShock 1 to 3 to me, because I think storyline and progression wise you don't really need the second one. Super cool concept. It's a first person game, just like the first one and the second one technically. I don't know, I like the idea of mixing powers. It's the world that they created is really interesting. And all of the BioShock games, with the exception of the second one, I don't know for sure, have some sort of twist, and I love that being baked into the story to keep you thinking. But this game is pretty as well, and
yeah, that I agree on a lot. This was the one with the
this is the Sky,
the female NPC that was always with you.
Yeah, kinda, yeah.
Yeah, she was really believable as like a player character almost.
Yeah, and just the whole concept of first game is underwater city. This game is a city in the sky where you actually would use like rails to travel around. Very cool.
Okay. The next one on the list is one I want on the list. It's Dust: An Elysian Tale. This is a really good like Metroidvania style game. The reason why I wanted to mention this on the list is that this game was famously made by literally one guy, like, who had a job. Like, he'd come home from work, he'd work on it, and it's incredible. Like, you would think that one person by themselves, he did all the music, he did all the graphics, all the programming, and you would think that's not possible to do. Like, you think about that, and then you think about a game that you wouldn't expect it to look this good or sound this good or play this good. It's really incredible what one person was able to do, And similar to Hotline Miami, it turns out this is just a thing moving forward.
Yeah, yeah.
but but at the time, I was blown away that it was even possible.
I would say mentioning this game, Injustice, that's only on there for me for two reasons. One, to note this is the first game post the Mortal Kombat kind of shaping the world of fighting games as far as story goes.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Mortal Kombat basically without finishers and with superheroes. But there's two notable things I wanted to say about it. Obviously, it has a really good story, but the story was so good that it actually, I believe it's the only time this has happened, it's caused a comic book to be spawned because of the story versus taking something that already existed and making it the story in the video game. The other part is, when I said Mortal Kombat changed the game for me where I wanted to compete, I actually did try to compete in this game in Chicago's tournament, which at the time was called Ultimate Fighting Game Table, but is now known as Combo Breaker. And I had practiced and registered for the tournament and missed it because I partied a little too hard with some people that were going to come to the tournament with me and did not wake up in time. And that was the end of me ever trying.
Next game on the list is Marvel Heroes, and we'll try not to go on this game for too long.
We can literally do an entire
because there's a lot to say about this game. For those of you that don't know, this was essentially a Diablo clone using the Marvel license. It's similar to Diablo 3. They also cloned the progression of the game going from being an awful launch to be a good game.
Yeah. But the difference is the studio. It is of note that Diablo 3 came from Blizzard.
Yeah.
Which the 2012 from the success of World of Warcraft in 2004. That's a lot of time where they have a huge studio at this point.
Oh, sure. I'm just trying to.
No, I just mean like they are very comparable, but the one credit I will give, especially to Marvel Heroes, is they did that with a lot less.
Yeah.
And they actually made changes a lot faster.
Yeah, it got launched in a state where the game was clearly not ready, and it was not a good game. And unfortunately, I think the game had to live with that for its entire lifetime.
Until they rebranded it in 2015.
Yeah, so it never really got the popularity it deserved, because once they did fix a lot of the problems, this was just... It's one of my favorite games of all time, to be completely honest.
Yep. And it was hard for me because I tried to get everybody I knew to play it right when it came out, because I was so excited, and I was maybe able to see past a lot of the flaws because I just was so excited for the gameplay. And I lost a lot of people that probably would have played it as close to as much as I did. I only had basically you and a couple others that came back to it or stuck around. But the one thing I will say is they really did, and we could spend a lot of time on this, but they did take care of their players where they tried to do right by them. It came out in a bad fashion, maybe to a fault, company-wise. Some of the good things they did for their giveaways, basically, for fixing issues, probably hurt them financially in the long run. But
yeah, and unfortunately, this is one of the on the list of games that you literally cannot play anymore, even if you wanted to. It's not about, oh, I have that system in the basement. It's not about, oh, I can't remember where I put it.
Right.
Because it was an always online game, and the company lost their license to Marvel because they failed to pay them. You can never play this game again, even if you want to.
Which is the most heartbreaking part about it. Because
yeah.
I would, if there was a version that could have been released that just had offline what the game's last patch was.
Yeah.
I would still play
still
it
playable, still worth playing today.
Yep.
Next on the list is Brother: A Tale of Two Sons. Neither of us actually played this game, but I put it on the list as notable because, one, I've heard it's very good, but also this is the game that got Joseph Ferris of the Game Awards fame started. This is his first notable game. I mean, I'm sure he did
games... A true legend, actually.
I'm sure he did games before this that didn't make it, but this is the first game that he did that kind of made it. Next on the list, I have Last of Us. I kind of don't want to talk about this game. I have very similar feelings to what we said about
Uncharted.
Uncharted.
Basically. Better. I mean, story better. The combat's a little bit better, but It's not a game I would rate very highly because of the same way I feel about the Uncharted games.
Okay. So we'll move on. Next on the list was a game that you want to talk about, actually.
Yes, this is notable. Deadpool. This is before the movie came out. I think a year before the movie came out, and it's Deadpool in a video game. It's perfection. It's not a perfect video game, but it perfectly captures Deadpool in a video game. A weird game that we. Other thing is, it's weird that we haven't seen a sequel. Kind of like what you said about LA Noire. I don't know why they didn't make a sequel to this game. Outside of it's probably.
Marvel licensing is
yeah.
not the most fun thing to go through.
Yeah.
Pikmin 3 is the next one on the list. You know, it's notable. It's a major Nintendo franchise. I don't personally like Pikmin that much, so I don't really have much to say about it. Next on the list, we have Dive Kick, which was actually notably debuted at the UFGT that you did not go to.
Yep.
This is just a really fun fighting game. It's very simple. You have 2 buttons for every character. A jump button and a kick button, and then if you press them both at the same time, it uses your meter.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. Not much else to say. The next game on the list is Grand Theft Auto 5.
Huge game. This is a weird one for me when it comes to scoring in our later list because of sequels, but man, I bought this game twice because it came out. This is the year it came out on Xbox 360. Their real new mechanic in this game was multiple protagonists.
Yeah.
And I don't remember. I think they did a good job of selling it on the fact that you could seamlessly switch between them in the middle of missions when they were all together. And I can vouch for the fact that that was done perfectly. First try, and it was like...
Yeah, I think for me, I'm kind of one of those people that's of the opinion that Grand Theft Auto games can be kind of samey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I put Red Dead Redemption in together with them in a lot of ways. It's kind of just a different skin on the same one. Just like every Grand Theft Auto is just kind of different skin on the same Grand Theft Auto. But like you said, the bringing in the new characters in this one with the 3 characters was a really cool mechanic. Trevor was...
He was unique. He outshined the other ones by quite a bit.
Probably one of my favorite video game characters of all time. Yeah. Very memorable. The voice actor, I don't know his name, but man, what a good job by that guy. He absolutely killed it.
Well, and I was thinking about Injustice, how I went to an actual comic book because the game did so well. Trevor is in the Walking Dead TV show, and I highly think it's because of his performance in this game. I don't know who that guy was before this video game, and then he's gotten roles in a lot of other things that are live movies or TV shows because of how good he pulled off.
I'm not going to say he carried this game, because I think this game would be good either way.
Yeah.
But, damn, this is like one of the best performances of all time for a video game actor.
I agree. Really, really good game, and again, it came out with the Xbox One. We're not going to talk about it again because that was maybe 2015 probably, maybe even later. But one thing I'll say is even for Xbox One, I bought it again because I obviously had moved on to Xbox One, but they added a first-person view. That was literally... They found another way to make it not the exact same, even though it's the same game. They added a first-person, very in-depth way of playing. You couldn't do that before in Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun to try and play through the game in first person.
The next thing on the list we have is Dota 2 came out. This is kind of a lie. Dota 2 is an open beta for literally over 2 years at this point, but this is the official release of it. Yeah, it's a game that I like a lot and have played a lot, so I wanted to mention it, but it's kind of, in my opinion, a little bit of a lie to say that it came out in 2013. This is just the official release out of open beta, but yeah. After that, we have Ninja Turtles Rise Out of the Shadows.
This is the second maybe of 2 arcade-only games that I wanted to mention. I can't remember if there's others. And this is a really, really good Ninja Turtles game. If you like the original arcade game, which is the second Ninja Turtles game for NES, technically, and Turtles in Time, which are lauded usually by most people, this game is an actually true sequel to those, if you let it be. but I think this came at a time, especially for me, when reviews were making or breaking the success of some games, and it did not get great reviews. But it plays really well, and it's a lot of fun. Had great replayability, and you could actually replay the game in arcade mode, which would make it like an arcade game playthrough.
Next on the list is Path of Exile. Neither of us are Path of Exile players, but very popular game to this day, so we brought it up. Next on the list is Black Flag, which we kind of talked about in a weird way earlier.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think you want to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, it's Assassin's Creed 4, and what I mentioned earlier about Assassin's Creed 3 is how I wish they, like, you could make an entire game based on the ship fighting mechanics in Assassin's Creed 3 near the end, which is very minimal. This is an entire game about the ship mechanics in Assassin's Creed 3. It's a pirate version of the Assassin's Creed world. You can tell they hit a home run with the ships because everything else in the Assassin's Creed story to this point, without getting into it too much, was kind of like progressive. Like the years of the first one and then the years of the second one were later. This one actually backs up time just to force in, because obviously this pirate stuff happened before Assassin's Creed 3's events and the Revolutionary War. This actually backed up just to make it work. It's one of the prettiest games they had made, and definitely this year one of the prettiest games around. Water mechanics, ship battles, everything is great, and it's another one that they, because Xbox One had come out soon after, they re-released it slightly visually updated. I actually bought it twice and beat it.
This one though, they gave you a discount for that.
That is true. I don't know if that was.
It was really
Best
cheap.
Buy
I think
only.
it was like $10 or something.
It might have been Best Buy that did that. Best Buy was actually had, I think, a pretty cool deal where if it was, I think both. So then that might have been all the games I have. If you had a 360 game and that was upgraded to Xbox One, I think you got some buyback.
Okay.
I can't remember exactly how that worked, but it was a good deal.
It's not nearly as egregious as these days.
Yeah.
Where we're buying $60 games that are old. We'll talk. We can touch on this later.
Yeah. So actually, if we move on, so this is the year Xbox One came out. It would be November. So now we're into November, and this next game is an Xbox One launch game, Dead Rising 3. I already said I love this franchise. This game is really good because it introduced, well, 2 had this, but it better introduced co-op into Dead Rising 3. As each Dead Rising game comes out, the worlds got bigger. So first you went from a mall, then you went to
like a block,
strip mall, but also casino. Yeah, so like a block of malls, and then this is an actual small town with all the above in it. So now you have vehicles. You did have vehicles, but now you really have vehicles that matter. From 1 to 2, you got combo weapons. From 2 to 3, you got combo vehicles, which were a little silly, but it was fun. What was impressive about this game is the amount of zombies on the screen at one point. I don't know if I can touch on a game that really changed that.
You know, I was thinking about that just now, in the last 2 seconds since you mentioned it, but it's funny. There was an achievement in the original Dead Rising where you had to kill a bunch of zombies, and so the way that most people do that is you drive the car around the parking garage.
Yeah.
But notably, the parking garage was really dark, and so you could only see, like, the headlights of your car, which sort of masked the fact that there were only so many zombies on the screen.
Literally, there had to be, I don't know the actual, it had to be 500 to 1,000 on the screen at once in this.
Yeah,
and that was maybe
that game,
not even 50 to 100.
That would make you feel like there was 100 on the screen, but there really wasn't, because it was just showing your headlamps.
You had to kill 58,000 zombies in the first one, and to do that, you had to drive in the parking garage, like he said. And what was funny about that is some of the zombies had explosive, like, canisters that they were wheeling around, because they were, whatever. And what's funny is you couldn't see those coming because they would spawn in
the headlights.
And then all of a sudden you'd be... That was how your car eventually broke down. But yeah, really good game. The other thing of note of Dead Rising 3 is it is the first where the time limits... It was still there, but it did not matter. Like the second one. You could do... The cool thing to me about Dead Rising was you had to prioritize, I'm just going to have to let this side mission guy die because I can't get there. Or if you let the story go, you lose the whole game is done, basically. Yeah. And in this one, you could let the story go and catch all of the side stuff without any fear. And that hurt the game for me, but it wasn't the worst.
Next on the list, underrated because it's a Wii U game. Or maybe not underrated, but underplayed. Super Mario 3D World. Really good Mario game, in my opinion. Actually, probably reminds me of Mario World more than any game since Mario World. And since Mario World is one of my favorites, that really stuck out to me as something very cool. Um,
I'm trying to think when the Wii U came out because if I don't think this is the same year, I think it's 2012.
no, because the Super Mario Wii U came out with it, so this would
Oh,
have
that's
been year
right.
two.
So it is 2012 that Wii U came out, and the reason I say that is because I didn't get this game right away. I might not have gotten it till the next year, but I got it around this time, just not right at launch. And they released a Wii U bundle where you got this and Super Mario Brothers, the 2D one, and I absolutely love this game. Like it was hard for me to touch anything else when I first got this because it really got me back to. It's not 2D, but it kind of got me back to how I felt about Super Mario World plus Super Mario 64. Like it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, the overworld map really just has that like
That
world
reminds me
feel
of-
to it.
Yeah,
That's kind of my issue with Super Mario Wii U. Not to get super derailed here, but it doesn't feel like they made each of the worlds a world.
yeah,
Like in how Mario 3 you had the giant world, and it was very obviously the giant world. Or like in Super Mario World you have the donut plateau, and it's very obviously the donut plateau.
yeah,
But
yeah. This really does.
they went
that.
super generic in Wii U, and Wii, Super Mario Wii,
Yeah.
and then in Super Mario Wii U was also like that.
Similar thing.
And
yeah.
this was like each world was a world, and it was
And
the
this game-
ice world. It was the ice world.
This game was. It had. Really, when we talk about a Mario game, you have to talk about the power ups. And this game had really cool power ups.
Yes.
All of them did something for a different benefit that was really useful. And it actually didn't have the Koopa Kids, which I usually would score downwards, but it's just such a good game even without them. I could only imagine what it would have been like if those were the world bosses. But
Okay. On the list next we have Arkham Origins Batman.
just notable as the only non-Rocksteady Batman game that is not usually considered in the true trilogy of Arkham Asylum, City, and Night. It's okay, but it's very clearly they tried to do what Rocksteady did, and just that was about it.
On the list after that we have WWE 2K14. Again, it's a sports game, so it comes out yearly, so we don't normally list these, but this was notable because I believe THQ was no longer working on the title for the first time.
Yeah, it's almost more notable because we have a huge. If you go back up to N64 days, wrestling games were a huge part of both of us, and this to me was my chance to get back into them. I don't think they were annual basically back then,
No, definitely
and
not.
they started to become annual but with different names, and this is where they started branding them under 2K, like you said, and the roster change was huge. This was my chance to jump back into it. It's a really good job, but both
Okay.
before and after this, they start to go into the Madden thing where not much change every year.
All right, that wraps up 2013. Did you have a game of the year for 2013?
Well, it's hard with these games because kind of like what you said about Diablo last year, but Marvel Heroes has to get it for me. It's not. That was a game of almost the half decade because it was so important to me. But if I'm not allowed to choose an MMO type game, it would be GTA 5. But Marvel Heroes is just too huge for me.
I think for me, counting Marvel Heroes as it existed in 2013 against it, since I did for Diablo 3 in 2012, I think I have to go with Tomb Raider. I think that the Tomb Raider reboot was just really well done.
Yeah, I can. I feel like I alternated years with how much I had.
Yeah.
And I had drought years because I had nothing in 2012. 2011 was huge. But yeah, same.
This year is very good.
There's a lot that's good. I just had to pull one out. And Marvel Heroes is me. It's I wasn't going to get to put it as game of the year another year because of the whole rebranding thing, so I felt like I needed to take the opportunity when I could.
Okay.
All right. So we can move on to
2014. All right, first one on the list we have is DK Tropical Freeze, which is kind of the what I was taking a shot at when I was making fun of Black Flag actually giving a discount for a release.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yep.
But I did not play this until the Wii version came out, or until the Switch version came out. But
I do own this Wii U version, and kind of playing off of your joke is that's what I now feel punished since since owning a Wii U, because Switch is basically taking all of the great Wii U games and re-releasing them, and I don't want to buy them twice. But this is one that's arguably worth it, and it's a return to form, technically the second return to form, but of the Donkey Kong Country
yeah,
series.
if you really like Donkey Kong Country games, that's just what this is. It's a hard one. It's not super easy, and I didn't know it at the time when this game came out, but I've learned recently, or more recently than this at least, is that it turns out that hard, like high execution platformers is not in 2014, but in 2019, it's one of my favorite genres.
Yeah.
And so, playing the Switch version in 2018, after I had learned this fact about myself, made it a really fun game for me. I very much enjoyed it because I do nowadays really like playing high execution platformers.
I think it's important to note that I played it through maybe twice, and I don't think this should hurt the score. I'm saying that sometimes people do this, is it doesn't have replayability necessarily, but that's what I like about it. It's got the classic replayability, where the replayability is just to beat it again.
Yeah, because it's hard.
I don't need unlockables or hidden things in every single game, and I appreciate that about this.
Lords of Shadow 2 is next on the list.
Lords of Shadow 2, if we go back to the beginning of the podcast, almost follows the rule of sequels for me. I almost would have taken that over Lords of Shadow 1 as best in the franchise. It's just, I like Lords of Shadow 1 as well. But it is the perfection of their game. The problem with this is the story. It's not quite as... Or I'm sorry, it's a little bit weirder than the first one. But the gameplay is perfect. The gameplay is where they took what you had. It's honestly, it's Castlevania, Metroidvania. Again. You know what I mean? Like, Lords of Shadow was very linear. Lords of Shadow 2, they went back to Metroidvania in a 3D world, which I'm sad that this got panned in the reviews, and there's some dumb mechanics like having to turn into a rat and stealth.
It's weird that they wouldn't like that, because that's part of what people love about Symphony of the Night, is you have to turn into fog.
Yeah, I don't know. People that don't know any better, honestly, say, "Oh, the Dracula has to turn into." Oh, that's what I should know. Spoilers. I won't say who he is. But you play as Dracula in this game. Dracula is the hero, and it's so cool. But they didn't like that Dracula has to belittle himself to turn into a rat, but he turns into any creature that that's actually very common if you think about the lore and the way he's been perceived.
Yeah, I think that if that's a real complaint, I don't agree at all.
And I can say I've gone back, because this is backwards compatible now. This was a 360 game. It's backwards compatible. That's one thing to note, though. I just said Xbox One came out in 2013. This came out in 2014, but for 360. So
that
didn't love that. Yeah. But it is backwards compatible now, so I beat it at the time. I've gone back now and played it, and those sections aren't that bad, and it's very good. The bosses are very good. The bosses are to the level of Dark Souls, big time bosses with mechanics, and it's hard. It has some difficulty, and it's got your Metroidvania power ups, which I don't know if I love anything more than that kind of style.
Next on the list we have Banner Saga. I don't have a lot to say here. It's just a solid game. The main reason I put on the list is just to say this was like a independent game that's an RPG that was of large scale. So it was similar to the other independent games I brought up so far. It wasn't that it was amazing to me personally, but it was like, hey, independent games can do this too. Mm-hmm. And so it was cool for that reason. The next one on the list after that, we have Bravely Default. This is a game, both of us weren't handheld players, so neither of us have played this game either.
Yep.
But I wanted to bring it up importantly because this is the formation of the team that's known for Octopath Traveler. They did this game. They did Bravely Second, which is the sequel to this game, as well as Octopath Traveler. But very promising studio. I'm looking forward to what they're making next. And this was their first game. After that, I have Hearthstone on the list. Not a whole lot to talk about here either, because this is just a multiplayer card game. But it's super popular, so it's definitely notable. It's a Blizzard game, so it's notable. But I don't really have a lot else to say about it.
It's notable because it's...
I personally did play it for a very long time. Yeah. I don't currently play it.
I've never played it, and I don't dislike those kind of games. It's just not one that I played.
I played it up through... Knights of the Frozen Throne was the last expansion that I bought a lot of packs for, and then I just kind of did I'm spending a lot of money on this, so I moved on.
Yeah, for me it was, I should have tried it at the beginning, but I didn't, and it was too big for me to get into by the time I would have.
After that on the list, we have Watch Dogs.
Really?
I mean, most people know of Watch Dogs. I mean, it's an Ubisoft game, which is a major publisher, so there's obviously that.
If you hear background noise, it's because I do have 2 dogs, so they might be partying a little too hard.
Watch Dogs is mostly notable because it started a franchise which, as far as we know, moved on to get a lot better. I mean, 2 was more critically acclaimed, and 3 looks good, but it's not out yet.
Watch Dogs is weird for me because it was... I can't think of a good comparison right now, but it was a game that was like, why is this game not out yet? You kept hearing about it at award shows or like E3, stuff like that, and it seemed like they kept delaying it. I believe they did delay this at least once, if not twice, by a significant amount. And the concept was really super hyped up by their marketing team and was interesting. It was, to me, it was supposed to be, is this a GTA, but with, hackers? And the game itself was really lacking for the first one. This was one for me where I stopped playing it because I was uninterested, and I went back to finish it 6 months to a year later. And the other point I will make is this is the game where I actually, for how hyped it was and the time put into it, the graphics should have been phenomenal. And
it's well documented. It's well documented they lied to us about the graphics, and so for that reason...
Well, I just mean, it's Ubisoft, so we had Assassin's Creed 4, which had great graphics. And then we had Watch Dogs, which was just very boxy. Like, it was, when you got into the details, it was bad.
Okay. Next on the list, we have Mario Kart 8. Now, I'm just talking about here, solid Mario Kart game, mostly notable because it's still the current Mario Kart.
Yeah. It's Mario Kart 7 and 8 are a new way that I think it was Mario Kart 7 when they kind of changed the format, because Double Dash was before that. So they went back to the classic.
Yes and no. Yes, as far as console games go, 7 was the direct sequel to Double Dash. But I would mention here that the DS version of Mario Kart is an extremely good and probably still my favorite version of Mario Kart.
Yeah, I should say I'm not counting non handheld ones in that.
Sure. In that. Anyway, not much else to say about that. XCOM also came out this year. It's not a game. I do like this game, but it's just solid.
It's a style that I like.
Yeah, mainly I mention this because this team that made this game went on to make a game later that we'll talk about a lot that both of us really, really enjoyed.
Yes.
After that, we have Evil Within.
Quick recap is really it just was a return to roots but it can't be the same brand of the Resident Evil survival horror.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is this was a true like old school Resident Evil when Resident Evil was not interested in making those games.
Right.
So
and
at that time,
is exactly what it needs to be. It's graphically updated Resident Evil survival horror. It's scary. It's mentally scary.
You don't have a million bullets.
That's really it. I don't know if I've ever beaten it because freaked me. I mean, with scarier games, sometimes I have to take breaks, but with this game, I went back to it a few times, and I think that's part of the problem is I stopped. I don't have a negative thing to say about it, but for some reason I went back to it and stopped playing, and it got to a point where I got lost. There's another game coming up that we haven't gotten to yet that I did the exact same thing with that I didn't finish. So it nailed what it needed to do.
Shadows of Mordor. Actually, the next 2 games are both games that you want to talk about.
Yep, Shadow of Mordor, Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor is the Lord of the Rings spin-off game that really... It's really good. We don't need to talk about the details outside of the fact that when I brought up Batman Arkham Origins, that was the non-Rocksteady Batman. This takes that same format. You can clearly tell the combat system is pulled from Arkham Origins, but they made it their own. Unlike it being a clone of Batman and a knockoff, this is actually their format used for their own line. So it's good. And then the next one, yes, I also did want to bring up is Dragon Age Inquisition. I actually think this is the worst Dragon Age.
It's not about controversial. That we both did play this game.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't. Yeah, I I think I liked the game more than you did.
Here's my thing and this actually is what I wanted to tie to Skyrim more. The sheer amount of side quests are overwhelming in this game, and they got out of control.
Okay, I think one thing I would say is just that I didn't play Dragon Age 2, and I think part of the reason why I like this one more than you is this one introduced the where you kind of have to force your four characters to work together like an MMO party works together. That existed in 2, but for me this was the first time.
I don't know. Did you finish 1 all the way through?
I did not.
1 did that better than 2 did. That's why I think this would have been a better 2 in that regard. The combat, well, you could stop combat in this. That their combat camera where you could pan out to tops, like bird's eye view.
Mm-hmm.
That was really good when it comes to party combat. That was new to this game. The actual combat working together was not necessarily new. It was just the fact that you could play it better. Because if you remember in the first one, you could actually pause, and it was similar in that regard. You could pause and queue up certain things that would combo off of each other. It's just that this was really well done. My beef really was this, and usually I wouldn't say this, but the story was there was no linear amount to the story, so it was way easy to get lost in what you were doing or how to progress anything.
Okay. Next on the list is Papers, Please. This is my edition. Mm-hmm. This game is it's a really simple indie game actually. You play as like a border guard, and so people will come and they hand you all their stuff to get into the country, and you have to review it and decide if it's real or not. It sounds stupid, but there's actually quite a bit of depth to it, and it also has a story that's kind of like some people might be like, oh, if you let me in even though I'm fake and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's actually really good. It's also an indie game. But yeah, Papers, Please. It's a really simple sounding game, but it's so good. Actually, so good. And then we have 2 more. We have Smash 4,
which is really, I like this game more than I guess a lot of people do, but it's just because it suffers from coming out of the Wii U. Most people didn't know this game existed or haven't played it because of that.
I just think it's easily, by process of elimination, you can just make it the worst Smash very easily.
Which doesn't mean it's a bad game, at least to me, but it's definitely the worst one.
Sure, Smash games are all pretty high quality, but it's just like Brawl has, people hate the tripping, but if you're not super competitive like us, it's still really fun. It introduced having non-Nintendo characters. That was when where Snake came out, and it really blew everyone's mind.
Yeah, that's where I think I give it some credit.
It also had the best single-player mode by far of any of the Smash games.
Yep. Up to this point.
Yeah, and then Melee is considered the best competitive by a lot of people. Not everyone, but a lot of people. It's the fastest game, so it's fun in that reason. Mm-hmm. I personally like it because it's not balanced, which is maybe something we'll talk about later, but not later in this video, but maybe in a different video, about how games are made to be balanced nowadays compared to before.
Yeah. But I know you said we'll talk about it later, but for me, a big part of that is PvP or PvE only game too.
Yeah, and so for that reason, and then 64 was the first one ever. Mm-hmm. So for that reason, with Ultimate just kind of being a better version of this game, it's just really easy to. It doesn't take long to rationalize it being the worst Smash game, and so for that reason, I don't really care much for it. And then the last game on the list for 2014 is Titanfall.
Really, it's just notable. I owned it. It's a PvP. It's notable in the fact that it was the first game that I know of that was a PvP shooter like Halo, Gears, Call of Duty, but they had no campaign at all, and they didn't feel the need. They didn't think they needed to. They were adamant with that. I think they did add one later on, even in this game.
Well, 2 had one. I don't know if 1 ever.
I thought they did add one even to this, but much later.
Sure,
but
it's funny now because people were really mad. They were like, "Man, this game is really good, but there's no campaign mode." And nowadays, it's just like nobody would complain about that. So it's kind of weird how since then it's been normalized, because this game definitely took a lot of shit for opting to not put.
Yeah, and it was a good game. For me, don't always want to play that, so I could see wanting a campaign. But that's really it. The other thing of note about it is it was an Xbox One. I don't think it was exclusive. Maybe it was at first. But it's notable that I think a lot of the games we talked about in this year, which is the first year after new systems came out, none of those are really necessarily applying only to those needs. But
Okay. Do you have a game of the year for 2014?
yeah, it's kind of like when I went Resident Evil 6, but I feel better about this one. It's Lord of Shadows 2 for sure.
Okay. For me, I'm gonna wimp out like you and do runner up this time because there's two games I feel strongly about. I think for me the answer is Papers, Please. That game is just very original. There's no other game like it, and it's super good. But at the same time, I'm gonna give runner up to Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze just because it's probably my current favorite genre, and this is an extremely good entry into like 2D platformers that require execution to actually be able to beat the game.
Yeah, definitely. That was close for me, but this was my chance to get Lords of Shadow 2 on the list somewhere.
Okay.
So that does wrap up 2014.
We're gonna take a break to put the dogs out.
Yeah, they're a little wily.